Ben, back for the next broadcast here. So last night I was up till about 2 a.m., maybe later, working to complete the latest article. And maybe it shows. I'm not sure. And sometimes if I don't get as much sleep, my delivery doesn't flow as well as I'd like it to, but let's just go through it and see where we go with this. So today's broadcast is Breaking Up and Bouncing Back, Unconventional Strategies for Rapid Healing. So in my mid-20s, I found myself reenacting the traumas of my childhood and adolescence, and as I would form attachments, romantic attachments, and in my intimate and more likely not so intimate relationships. And that was compounded in many ways, a number of factors here, like struggling with the anxious attachment style, dealing with patterns of abandonment, unrequited love, and it sure didn't help to be in a dating culture, where there's this kind of prevalent gaminess or whatever. It was much easier for me during the time I lived among some of the Native American communities in Oklahoma, living among the Kiowa people and also Navajo reservation. But when I migrated back into our mainstream Wonder Bread culture, I just wasn't on the right wavelength. So I found myself consumed by sadness and grief and all these other overwhelming emotions, not quite knowing what to do with it. And, just was at a complete loss. And yet I was also just totally determined to do whatever it took to heal. And so I just began to explore all kinds of different practices and therapeutic interventions. And so over all these years, now I've just kind of mapped out, again, the practices and therapeutic interventions is I went through my own healing process and I became stronger and more resilient and worked through all that craziness and torment and everything. And I was feeling a lot lighter. And as I was evolving, so were my relationships. Over time, I found myself attracting companions who were a better match for me and with whom I could create healthier, more meaningful, and deeply fulfilling relationships. And so, so as those changes occurred, then that brought me to a place where I could assist others who were dealing with the same kinds of issues to facilitate their healing journey. So for 11 years or so, I was teaching classes on a weekly basis in New York City. When I was in this part of the country, I would travel some here and there. And then every other week, I'd go up to Somerville, Massachusetts, in the Boston area. And so I'd get all kinds of people, either in the midst of a breakup or divorce or struggling with patterns of abandonment and rejection, unrequited love, that were just in abusive relationships, that were totally strung out, just bleeding emotionally, just banged up, whatever. And so I would teach them this series of meditation practices that I developed over the years that began to facilitate their own healing process, by which they would start digesting their internal representations of the person they were seeing or that they were wanting to be with, and all of those the crazy making things that were said and done, and all the emotions that were overwhelming them and everything. So they would digest and diffuse all that, and that emotional intensity would go down and become more manageable. And I'd see these people becoming stronger and more resilient. And quite a few of them, these individuals, showed up in my classes, would work with me. individually, which is much better because sometimes if I just see, there's a group of people in front of me in class, I could take people so far in a group context, but the most powerful intervention occurs when I get people, I'm able to work with people one-on-one in person. For those of you who don't know, I spent years training with a traditional Native American doctor, a medicine man who transmitted portions of his own healing gifts. So as I work with people individually, in person, it's able to take all that horrendous suffering and transmute it. They're able to digest all that experience and build a whole new foundation. I much prefer to work with people one-on-one in person because that's when the most powerful change or transformation occurs. The challenge, too, is that not everybody has the opportunity to do that. People contact me from all over the world in different parts of this country. And so I want to be able to provide, be of service and provide as many resources as possible. And also, as I was going through my own healing journey, there are times where I suffered so badly and again, flailing blindly, and I was just open and exploring, that commitment. I would test out different practices and interventions, anything that held promise. And that determination led me to discover a whole range of practices and interventions that, as you incorporate them into your life, as I did into mine, it will greatly accelerate your healing journey. So I'm going to refer to my notes at times because I have another one of these densely packed articles. A woman that I worked with some time ago, this referring to my writing, it says, I use an economy of words, which sometimes I get frustrated reading or listening to other people's books because there's so much filler content. I like to condense it down. And therefore, I condense huge amounts of information into small amounts. And although there is some repeating, that's what happens when you have psychological text, because, psychology books, for years, I just devoured clinical psych texts, because I want to understand my own emotional woundedness and that of the many people that I've worked with over the years. Like to constantly be learning. So let's see, moving right along. So one of the things I start out talking about is like the illusion of love. That those of us who, especially if we have this what they refer to as anxious attachment style. As children, adolescents, many of us suffered neglect or abuse, and we had limited resources to cope or make sense of what was going on. We just didn't know how to deal with all those overwhelming emotions. So oftentimes what happened is we disconnected from our immediate reality to varying degrees, and we would disappear into fantasy. We just had these crude means through which we would attempt to cope with the realities of our lives at that point. And so we'd often go off into fantasy. And what often happens for many of us, that carries over into our adult lives. And so as we get into relationships, we form an attachment to someone, and maybe that person's not reciprocating our feelings, our desires for connection, to be together. And we go out into these fantasies, we project onto the other person, we construct all these elaborate narratives, and that takes us up into our head, and we're more disconnected from the present moment reality, and we're not seeing that other person for who they truly are. And it's so important in these instances that we catch ourselves and we bring ourselves back into the here and now, acknowledging the other person for who they are, what they're saying, what they're doing, the reality, like the actual relational dynamic, like no, you're not in a relationship with that person, or no, and they're not loving and kind and supportive. Maybe they're a shithead, maybe they're being abusive or a jerk, or they're ghosting you, or whatever they're doing. What are they actually doing, and how does that feel? Bring yourself back to the here and now. Bring yourself back to reality. One of the main reasons so many of us suffer terribly in relationships is because across the board, vast majority of us, we were never taught how to work constructively with our emotions. What do emotionally? We distract ourselves, numb ourselves. We self-medicate with alcohol and other recreational drugs, and we eat garbage foods, ice cream, refined sugar, all that stuff. We go shopping, do all kinds of things, so that we binge on Netflix and social media. And, even if we're going through, a relationship blows up on us, we get together with our friends and they're trying to pull us out of it, because they themselves, they're uncomfortable with their own emotions, their own vulnerabilities. They can't handle it. So they want to pull you out of your feelings. But the problem with that is we got this long history of disconnecting emotionally. And so what happens is we don't process, we don't digest our life experiences and our authentic emotional responses. So what happens then? The residual of all that unprocessed emotion just backs up in our bodies. We carry it. And so if we go through a breakup, if someone's jerking us around emotionally, giving us with all these mixed, ambiguous signals, and so when that happens, it elicits all these painful emotions that we're holding within our bodies from all the past losses and hurts, things going all the way back to our childhood, plus more relatively recent events. It just brings all that back. And especially if we go through a devastating breakup or something, it just cracks us wide open. And so we have all our long history of all the emotions attached to our deep emotional wounds. It all comes up and it consumes us. And being that we've avoided and disconnected and distract ourselves from our emotions, that decreases our emotional processing capacity. Our computers have in our smartphones, they have a certain processing capacity, and sometimes we exceed the limits and then they slow down. They don't work as well. And so all this time we're shutting down, we're numbing, distracting ourselves emotionally, and it reduces our processing capacity. And so when we crash into a wall of a breakup or being ghosted or however the relationship blows up, it's all this emotion just floods our awareness, and we have this reduced processing capacity. We don't have the capacity to digest what we're going through. And so we tend to contract around those horribly painful experiences and in all those overwhelming emotions. So moving right along. And so it just, again, our defense mechanisms break down, and we're a mess, and it can drag on for weeks or months. And a lot of times I see people, months and years go by, and they're still holding a lot of the sadness and grief and the devastation. It's still trapped in their bodies. Because of the work I do and all the intensive practice, I developed this ability to see and feel deep into people's bodies and minds. And again, months, years later, it's still there. If you're not that attached to someone, okay, you get over it. It's not that big of a deal. But when you're really deeply attached to someone, it's like getting run over by a bus or something. I mean, it can hit really, really hard. And a lot of people just never fully process it. So when I was in my mid to late 20s, and by the way, I don't know if you're holding or if you're hearing the siren that's going in the background. Hopefully this microphone is screening it out, but it is a little distracting for me. Sometimes these ambulances, they turn down the street and the traffic's backed up and they sit there with the siren running indefinitely. I feel like throwing a brick at their window sometimes. Just, you're not moving anyway, turn the damn thing off. Oh. Anyway, refocusing here. So I developed this intensive series of practices that meditation practices. And one of the first things I did was I went into psychotherapy. And psychotherapy is an incredibly important part of many of our healing journeys. But I gained an intellectual understanding of why I was suffering so horribly, my emotional wounding, the traumas carrying over from my childhood and adolescence that were being reenacted in my adult attempts at relationship. But the patterns just kept repeating themselves, and I was still experiencing all those overwhelmingly painful emotions. Somehow instinctively, I had the sense to just dive into the depths of all those intense, overwhelming emotions. And at times, the emotions were so intense, so all-consuming, so overwhelming that the pain was excruciating, but I would dive so far into the depth of it. And I would just breathe very softly, very deeply. At times, it felt like my whole body was racked with that excruciating pain, but at a certain point, it would break open, and I could just feel it all coming out of my body in waves. And then underneath that, I could feel these powerful emanations of warmth just emerging from within. And I began to experience this sense of connectedness to a higher power. I think all of us, I'm not religious. I grew up in that evangelical Christian cult and had to deprogram myself basically. But so now I'm more of a secular humanist, and I've explored these different esoteric traditions. But in many respects, again, I'm more of a secular humanist. And I like these traditions because they help me to explore and realize my own innate human potential. But anyway, so I developed this system of meditation practices. I would dive into the depth of all these overwhelmingly painful emotions. As I kept breathing, the pain would break open, crack open, be coming out of my body in waves and these powerful emanations of warmth. And I would feel this profound sense of connectedness to a higher power. And I feel every one of us are at some level. We have this connection to this divine inner core being resides within every one of us. And it's this deep internal core is connected to a higher power. And so as I kept doing this practice, I'd feel this presence, this connection would grow even stronger over time, moving right along. There are different versions of this practice. One thing that I encourage people to do, and I walk people I work with through this practice, is, for instance, picture your current or former partner, or that person that you are longing to be in a relationship with. If you're dealing with patterns of unrequited love, for instance, picture them, see them. Close your eyes, by the way, in doing this. Sit comfortably with your eyes closed, picture them, feel their presence, notice how it feels in your body, and breathe very softly, very deeply. Follow the feelings and bodily sensations as they go through their progression. And as you can do this, a lot of times, notice where these feelings are situated in your body. As you breathe into the feelings, fully immersed in those feelings, you're not observing them from the side. You're not looking at them. No, get deep inside the feelings. Breathe into these feelings from the middle. You need to be immersed deep inside the feelings, very softly, very deeply. And yes, it can feel horrendous at times, but get your ass deep inside those feelings. Breathe softly and deeply. Allow the feelings to be what they are. You're not sending light to the feelings. You're not trying to breathe them out and make them go away. No, be deep inside the feelings. Breathing very softly, very deeply. Follow those feelings. They'll go through a progression. Do they spread out, occupying more space? Do they move to a different part of your body? Do they, does it change to a different set of feelings? As you immerse in those feelings, you keep breathing with them, they will go through an evolution. Give it the time, really take time, at least 30 minutes, an hour. You need to learn to sit and be present with your feelings. If you can't feel it, you can't heal it. So get in the feelings, keep breathing, stay as present as you can, follow these feelings. This is going to help you to digest and assimilate a lot of these painful emotions. As you stay with them, as you digest them, these emotions will go through this transformation. What I found is it helped me to let go of a lot of these really, dissolve, digest, and let go of these unhealthy attachments. I let go of the abusive, crazy making, like some of the women I formed attachments to back in my 20s and 30s and stuff. And that has been a very important part of my healing and evolution, and for people that I've worked with. So very important. Another practice is we store a lot of the sadness and grief and anguish and other torment that we go through. It gets stuck in our chest cavity and our heart and lungs. Bring your awareness into your chest cavity, as much awareness as you can here. Initially, some people may feel numb. You may feel numb, but just bring as much awareness as you can to your chest cavity where your heart and lungs reside. Breathe any feeling, any sensation at all. No matter what you feel, just be present with it. Even if it starts out numb or just feeling just a little, just feel what you can and be breathing very softly, very deeply. As you continue to do this, usually the feelings will deepen, become more vivid. It may take some time. It could take some days, it may take weeks, whatever. Just stay with the practice. Keep doing it. As you continue to do so. When I first started doing this, it was numb at first, but then feelings of loneliness, a longing, it became really intense. After a while, it's like my whole chest cavity was just aching, all this leftover heartache. And I could feel it just aching throughout my chest cavity. I kept doing it. And as I continued to digest all these emotions, there was there was longing and loneliness, just all kinds of intense feelings. But as I moved through that, there was this euphoria and this sense of connectedness to a higher power. It was amazing, feeling ecstatic at times. There's also one of the big problems for many people is that I didn't initially, and so many of you folks don't, is that many people, maybe yourself included, are not all that present within your bodies. And so if you're going through this crazy making heart-rending drama and you're dissociate to varying degrees, you're living in your head or maybe even living from the diaphragm up, it's easy to get strung out on somebody, and you're more likely to deal with these patterns of abandonment, unrequited love. It's so much harder to let go. You get hooked on someone and you're like a drug addict, and you're hanging on to this person, trying to control the outcome and control them and whatever. And it's a big tormentuous, is that a word? Mess. And you can suffer indefinitely. It's absolute fucking hell to go through that. And so what I found, through my exploration is I would bring my awareness all the way down into my abdomen. And in doing this, best of your ability, bring as much awareness as you can deep into your abdomen. A lot of people are numb here. They don't feel much of anything initially. But bring as much awareness as you can. If you have to, rest your hands on your abdomen. If you could feel nothing else, feel your hands resting against your abdomen. Maybe feel the warmth of your hands as they rest against your abdomen. Place them right over where your navel is situated. And breathe softly and deeply. Feel anything at all, no matter how minute. Some people may feel a good bit initially. A lot of times people bring their awareness there. It feels heavy and congested and bloated. Some people feel nauseous because of all the toxicity that's accumulating there. But bring your awareness, go deep into your abdomen, breathe into any sensations. For most people, it's more sensation in the beginning, and even as you continue. But for some of us, we'll also experience emotion down in here. Breathe into anything you feel. Keep breathing into it. As you continue, sometimes you may experience rumbling, churning, burning, pulsing, tingling. You may get gassy. You could start belching, farting, maybe even run to the toilet. It has the effect of clearing out your digestive tract. You keep doing this. A lot of people do this. I teach people this practice if they're suffering from ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Again, remember, I'm trained by a traditional Native American doctor, so I work with all these conditions. When I teach people these practices, it helps to improve the functioning of their digestive organs, but it also gets you deeper into your body. You become more grounded. You become more rooted. As that happens, it helps you to develop this foundation. You need that foundation because as you're more rooted or grounded, it makes it easier for you to work through the crazy making relational drama. And also, as you're more rooted and grounded, you're less likely to develop those unhealthy addictive attachments that leave you strung out on somebody who's jerking you around. So do your practice. Consistent daily practice is crucial. Looking back over the years, I would say the biggest mistake that I made, and I didn't have anybody to guide me for the most part. I was like flailing in the dark, flailing blindly, trying to make sense of all this. And I would practice when a relationship blew up. I would dive into the pain, instinctively. But there were times when I was just stuck and strung out or just in this weird suspension, stuck in a holding pattern, and I didn't do practice. And I regret that, but I didn't have anyone to spell it out to me and say, hey, you need to do this. It took me time to figure this out. So I would encourage you every day, sit your ass down, close your eyes. Whether it's bringing your awareness into your chest cavity or your abdomen, or someone stringing you out emotionally, you bring that individual into the forefront of your awareness and breathe all those feelings. Or if you're just overwhelmed with pain, just acknowledge what's happening, go into the depth of those feelings and keep breathing. As you continue to practice, you're not always going to be bleeding emotionally. You're not always going to be in pain. As I continued, I worked through all that crazy making drama, and a lot of days I sit down and practice. I'm not feeling any, I'm not in any kind of emotional torment or drama. Sometimes it's just sensations. I just feel the sensations of my body. Or maybe, we have all kinds of different interactions, conversations with people, or challenges we face in our lives. Whatever's going on day to day, I just bring it into my awareness and I breathe with whatever feelings or sensations come up. I get a lot of insight. I get a lot of creative solutions. I come up with workable solutions that I could implement. And it enables me to just cope more effectively, or um, just keep moving forward in my life. So we need to do practice every day. Oh, another practice, very important. So in my late 20s, when I had a relationship blow up at one point and was ghosted, all that, and one night I just couldn't stand it anymore. You see, all those emotions that we experience when we're going through this heart-rending drama, that can be very hard on the body. It can really throw our bodies out of whack. It messes with our endocrine system, the balance of hormones and neurotransmitters, and it screws up our digestion and our sleep and everything, and we're just an absolute mess. And so one night I couldn't stand it, and I took off walking. And even then, I just instinctively, I just dropped into all those horrendous emotions and began breathing into them. But that became a routine for me late in the evenings. I would go out walking through the Brookside neighborhood when I lived in Kansas City for hours. And I would just keep walking and breathing. I'd feel all those crazy making emotions that had been bottled up in my body, and they would spread out through my aura, through that electromagnetic field surrounding my body. And so I could feel them circulating. And the Earth, the planet Earth, has its own electromagnetic field. And so the Earth's own electromagnetic field would filter these emotions as well, helping to soften and diffuse them. It would make all these emotions more manageable. And then later I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I would walk for hours or miles along the Rio Grande. And I would drop deep into trance as I would do so. And times I'd run into people who knew me, and they'd be staring at me and like, your eyes are glowing. And one would look at the other, you see that, don't you? And they're wondering, am I imagining this or something? And but I would go into such profoundly deep states, and it would help me to cycle through all these intense, overwhelming emotions, and it helped me to maintain sanity. A lot of this, again, is the carryover from traumas of my childhood and adolescence, manifesting, being reenacted in my adult relationships. And so, it was bad for me. And so doing all these practices, it's a crucial part for me of my healing journey. And if you incorporate these practices, whether you're working with a psychotherapist, doing deep tissue body work, any other intervention, you're going to get a whole lot more mileage, because your body is going to be so much more malleable. Now, again, these practices are very crucial, and I would say essential, because if you can't feel it, you're not going to heal it. If you disconnect from your emotions, the grief and sadness and anger, angst, all that crazy emotional turmoil, it's going to get stuck in your bodies. And you hold those emotions in your body, it creates barriers. Those barriers can prevent you from letting anyone else in. You got fucked over or betrayed, whatever stupid shit that person you were seeing or said or did that left you feeling so hurt, or if they were a narcissist or something, that creates barriers that prevent you from being able to trust and let anyone else in. And so that asshole back there is still controlling you. Do you want to allow that person to have control over you? Yeah, you need to process these emotions, because if you don't, they are still controlling you. So you need to work through that. And the only way you can really truly work through it is you got to connect with these emotions, and you got to process. You have to thoroughly digest them. So do the practices like I described here. And if you're struggling, if you're stuck, if you need help, most people do need some guidance. pick up the phone and call me. You can call my Google Voice number and leave a message. I will call you back. What is it? 332-333-3155. Again, 332-333-3155. Hey, while I'm at it, if you're getting value out of this video, you like what you're hearing, be sure to click the like button, whether you're seeing this on Facebook, if you're seeing this on YouTube. It helps the algorithm to pick it up and disseminate it so that more people are seeing this video. So it means you could be helping other people. And if you're really inspired, then click subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you know someone who's going through this heartrending drama, be sure to share this video with them, because you could really help somebody who needs the help. You do like to make a difference in someone else's life? Good. Share the video. Thank you. For me and for them. Everybody wins that way. Okay. Anyway, so when was it? In 2002, I started training with Shifu Li Tailiang, Chinese master in the internal arts of Xingyi Quan, Baguazhang, Tai Chi, and Qigong. And so I'd gone through too many mugging attempts. And, as I was training with them, he's teaching me these Qigong practices, these meditative practices. And at the time I was thinking, I need to learn to rip someone's head off. Why are you teaching me these meditative practices? And I didn't take him as seriously at first until I saw a friend of mine that I ran into in India that I hadn't seen in a few years. And he was doing pranayama practices, which are related to Qigong. There's a lot of exchange back and forth between India, China, Tibet, and everywhere in between. And I looked in his physical and subtle bodies, and I'm like, what the fuck have you been doing? I could just see this, all this development that had occurred. And it's like, well, maybe I better take these Qigong practices more seriously. And I get back to New York, and I'm training with Shifu, and I really threw myself into it. And I'd actually be doing a couple of hours of Qigong practice a day. And because in the internal martial arts, they teach you to build this base of power in the Dantian. And so they'd be doing all this practice, and then Shifu would be throwing punches at me, and then I would be using what he taught me, and I would be striking back. But at the same time, I'd be directing that internal power, and it would hit him and he'd go backwards. You'd get this kind of electrical shock, and it's like, he didn't expect that I would develop so rapidly with it. But last time I went through, I was engaged to a woman in Sri Lanka, and it blew up. There was number of factors. Especially her mother turned the family against us, and there was all that drama. But anyway, so the grief was profound. All those emotions coming back up, and I would dive into the depth of all that pain and the sadness. I'd picture her at times and be breathing through all those emotions. But then other times I would flip over into doing Qigong practice. In the Taoist tradition and these other ancient systems in China, they understood that these charged particles of life force fill the atmosphere. And so through intention, they would draw this qi, this life force, in through various pathways and direct it through the pathways in their body. And they used it to nourish and heal the internal organs, and to develop this internal power that they used for fighting and combat, and use this internal power to effect healing in the bodies of others and to evolve spiritually. So as I said, at times I'd be breathing into that sadness and other painful emotions, a heartache, and other times I would flip over and I would do the Qigong practices. Again, those emotions can be very hard on the body. We need to work with the emotions to digest and assimilate them. But when we can do Qigong, it helps to mitigate the intensity of all those overwhelming emotions. Qigong practices can be very intricate, very elaborate. There are people who teach them in different parts of the country. I learned a more specific set of Qigong practices that a lot of them are for the fighting combat purpose, but there also can be purpose specifically for building a very strong core foundation so that you stay more grounded and also especially bring a lot more awareness, consciousness into your abdominal region, so you're less likely to get strung out and you're going to work through the hurt and the craziness a lot faster, and it creates more balance and this sense of equilibrium, well-being. So when we go through a devastating breakup or divorce, you know, what I've heard for years is that emotional pain activates the same set of circuitry in the brain that registers physical pain. You know, so if you get banged up in an automobile accident, you're just or shot or whatever happens, you know, you feel all that, break bones, you feel all this physical pain. Well, the emotional torment utilizes the same brain circuits. And when we're in such debilitating pain, we don't feel like moving. We become really sedentary. You know, it's just like we're contracting. And the unfortunate thing about that is it can reinforce our stuckness. Those emotions just sit in our bodies, and that means you suffer for longer. So despite the fact that it feels so horrible at times, you really need to get your ass moving. And even if it's just graceful, flowing, gradual movement. Some forms of martial arts like Xingyi Quan that I trained in could be just very jarring, you know, but it's great if you're in combat, because you know you literally can rip up the body of some asshole who's trying to mug you or something. Other forms like Bagwazong is very flowing and circular movements. Bagwazong's cool because person tries to attack you, and next thing, before they know it, you're on your side and you're on behind them. They don't know where the fuck you are, and you're whacking the shit out of them simultaneously. And so it's really cool. You know, you confuse the fuck out of them, and you're beating the shit out of them simultaneously as you're spinning and whirling around them. So amazing martial art. But it's a very complex martial art. It takes a lot to learn that. But there's also like Tai Chi, and there's yoga. And so the adepts in these ancient cultures, you know, in India, where yoga originated, and Tai Chi in China, there's this whole science, these sciences that developed of the body and mind. And so they understood how various forms of movement and postures would stimulate the functioning of various organs and systems and help to move the life force through these pathways in the body. So if you can do like yoga and Tai Chi, that can help you to facilitate your healing. Now, one word of caution, I've seen people, I've worked with people who did even taught yoga, and it was the spiritual bypass for them. They would try to bypass their emotions, and they really fucked themselves up doing it too, because they ran from their pain, they ran from their trauma, and at some point it catches up to them. And I've seen that. You know, they would call me, and you know, they're get to a real crisis point where their organs and systems are massively malfunctioning and shutting down. So refrain from doing that. Deal with your emotions. As I said, you can't heal it if you can't feel it. So get in your emotions. Fasting can help to facilitate your healing as well. I'm always exploring, experimenting, you know, anything that enables me to grow, to heal, to evolve, make it a way of life. You know, you don't have to be in the middle of having your heart ripped out um, to be doing the practices and interventions that facilitate your continued healing and evolution. The more you just make it a way of life, whatever comes along. I mean, shit happens in life. And if you're doing consistent daily practice, you're making consistent use of the most effective interventions, you're building a much stronger, healthier foundation. It makes you so much more resilient. So when other people are freaking out, melting down, or shutting down, or whatever, contracting, you're the one who's stronger, more powerful, more highly functioning. And also, it increases your capacity so that you realize more and more of your potential. So, anyway, fasting. I've explored different kinds of fasting and will continue to do so. Thus far, I've done, say, between 4 and 15 days fasting, either juice fasting or fasting with water. I know some people say just do it only with water, but there's all kinds of disagreement when you get into, health, nutritional circles. So be open, explore, find out what works best for you when it comes to fasting. I would do water, and I would incorporate some minerals and electrolytes, because from what I've heard, you can go longer fasting that way. And also some people where they would get into trouble, just say only doing water, and maybe doing the what they call master cleanse, and they would end up depleting themselves of minerals and create some minerals and other nutrients, and they'd create some really serious health problems. But what I found when I did the water fasting, see, the body has this way of holding on to the traumas, and all of those horribly painful emotions just become deeply embedded within our bodies. And so I would do the fasting either with juice or water fasting with minerals and electrolytes, maybe throw in a few vitamins in there. And what would happen is, like, a lot of these emotions that were trapped in the cells and the organs and tissues and all, it's like it would just start breaking loose, and the emotions were so much more accessible. They were just coming out. And I would really be feeling is like they were so much more present. And when I would do my daily meditation practice, I could go so much deeper. And I had this mental clarity much greater than what I normally have, and I could make so much more headway. So if you're carrying, you have these long-standing patterns, abandonment, and unrequited love, or you keep attracting shitheads that torment you or whatever, if you do fasting, it helps you to bring out more of all this emotion that's trapped in your body. You bring the emotions up, you're able to process and digest them, and it enables you to break down those patterns so that they can be healed and transformed. When you have these patterns, it's important. You heal, you transform them. And if you use the interventions, which I'll be describing as I go further on, you build a whole new foundation is built. And with a new foundation, that enables you to attract healthier companions into your life with whom you can co-create more meaningful and deeply fulfilling relationships. Scrolling further down through our notes, my notes, that is, the need for intervention. I trained with one of the most powerful Native American doctors, medicine men of the last century, Horace Dokai from the Kiowa tribe. He was intense. I mean, this guy, like, medicine man, doctor, I'm allergic to bee and wasp stings. And when I get stung, I swell up. It's very painful, very uncomfortable. I have that allergic reaction, as I said. So one time I get stung, and Horace puts his hand onto my wrist where I had been stung. My wrist goes down within minutes to normal size. He takes all the swelling. What is that, a histamine reaction or something? It all goes away within minutes as he holds his hand on my wrist. Simultaneously, he's taking that swelling into his wrist. His wrist is swelling up. And then maybe in about 30 minutes or so, his goes back to normal. So he did all kinds of like mind-blowing, powerful healings that he facilitated. And I was so fortunate to have the opportunity to train with him. Horace transmitted portions of his own healing gifts to me, and then he had me go on the vision quest. I'll go into that a little later. But even Horace, as powerful as he was, every once in a while, every so often, he would have some of the other traditional native doctors, medicine men, he would have them work with him. And I do the same when, we're being naive, or maybe we just don't understand, or maybe being a bit stupid or something, that if we don't make use of the interventions that are available, we're only going to get so far in our healing. So yeah, we need to incorporate the most effective, powerful interventions. Again, psychotherapy for many of us can be a very important part of our healing journey, especially you have a lot of people, histories of trauma, maybe yourself as well, all kinds of crazy ass family dysfunction, your relationships, these really toxic dysfunctional patterns. You're probably not going to make sense of all that on your own. Most of us, at least at some point, need the intervention of a very understanding, gifted psychotherapist. I went further. I just kept devouring clinical psych texts and to understand everything I could about trauma and narcissism and all these other areas. And so I encourage you to do so as well. We need to keep understanding and informing ourselves, because a lot of times, we get involved with people who are, again, either narcissistic, borderline tendencies, someone who's bipolar, people with other mental health issues. And sadly, we have a very low level of understanding of these issues. We don't talk about it so openly, and so many people are grossly ignorant. Deep tissue body work is another crucial intervention. I think everybody needs to do this, because the emotions that we don't process get trapped in our bodies. All kinds of things, stress of work, all the crazy dysfunction that many of us grew up with, getting jerked around in relationships, trying to survive financially. We don't process these emotions. Our bodies hold on to these emotions. We do deep tissue body work, therapeutic massage, or rolling or something. I can refer people to you if you need. So ask me. If you're in New York City area, or if you're in Northern Idaho, some other areas, but anyway, what I found with deep tissue body work is that a lot of this emotion, and I've experienced this emotion trapped in the body, it breaks it loose when the emotions come up into your conscious awareness. It enables you to process or digest. First, you need to be able to access the emotions. It's hard to do that if they're just packed, down in your body, because they sit there and they're dense and you don't feel them. When they're broken loose, you can feel it. Once you can feel it, they're accessible. Then you can do the practices I described earlier in this video, in the article. that will be posted along with the video. Sensory deprivation flotation tanks. Wow, I didn't experience that until some months ago. So it's a newer intervention for me. Have you in a completely pitch black room. You can't see a damn thing. It's black in there. And you're suspended in a bath of salt water. And with that sensory deprivation, it's like all the stress and crazy overstimulation, especially now in this age where we got all these devices, internet and smartphones and social media. It's like all that overstimulation, all that excessive input, all these emotions. I feel like my body's decompressing. So all these emotions, it starts, I feel stuff just coming out of my body. And as it comes out of my body, I could access it. And I go into these profoundly deep states, and I could keep breathing into what comes up. And that helps me to process what I've held in my body. So if you're going through a breakup or just dealing with whatever stress in your life, if you have the opportunity, if this resource is available where you happen to live, make use of it. Acupuncture can be very valuable. It promotes a stronger body-mind connection, especially you're going through a breakup or divorce, you're getting jerked around emotionally, and that can be like torture. And it triggers the release of the stress hormone cortisol, and it throws your serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine neurotransmitter balance just way out of whack. And so you're not sleeping well, and your digestions gets all fucked up. And I'm a little creative with my language, so get over it. Anyway, they're just words. Doing acupuncture, it helps to, acupuncture is based on these ancient systems of medicine, which utilizes the chi or the life force and helps to direct it through the internal pathways or the meridians to help to nourish and then balance various organs and systems. And it just helps to establish a greater balance or equilibrium in your system. And that can help you to navigate the grief and the emotional torment. It makes it easier to process the emotions. So acupuncture is another good resource to turn to. There were times where every once in a while, one of these really gifted healers, there are traditions around the world. I know in our Wonder Bread culture here, there are people who go through 3 weekend workshops and they call themselves whatever master healers. And it's just absolute bullshit. You can't learn to be a healer in 3 weekend workshops. You know, it's like in these different traditions, usually you apprentice with an elder healer that's been practicing for many years. And there's a transmission that is given usually to one or just a few apprentices. Like my mentor, Horace, he transmitted portions of his own healing gifts to me. And then he would have me go on the vision quest where I fast the 4 days and nights alone in the mountains without food and water in order to earn the right to work with these gifts of healing. And so you have these like weekend master healers, and I see people, they work with, again, weekend master healers. Hey, if you had to, you required the intervention of a surgeon, for some serious medical issue. If you required the intervention of a dentist, you found out that individual, he or she had 3 weekends of training. How much confidence would you feel in their abilities? Hopefully, if you have any sense about you, not much. And same thing, as a healer, there's this long, arduous path of training, this intensive regimen you go through, as I described, training with my own mentor. And in traditions around the world, you go through quite a bit. You go through intensive years of training in order to develop these gifts of healing. And so I've seen people where maybe they've gone through a devastating breakup, maybe they have a history of childhood sexual trauma. And I see after they do those weekend master healer energy work sessions, and I look in their subtle bodies, their physical and subtle bodies, and that trauma is still there. And so there needs to be, like you have in the Western allopathic medical profession or dentistry or law or engineering, there are standards of credibility. And it's the same in healing. If you're going to work with a healer, work with a qualified healer. Seriously. But anyway, so in my mid to late 20s, I got to work with some very gifted healers, one from Brazil, another from the Philippines. And every time I do a session, I could feel an incremental jump. It was helping me to dismantle those deeply entrenched traumas and those patterns that were hardwired into my body and mind, my psyche, that caused me to perpetuate a lot of the dysfunctional relational dynamics where I would form attachments to women that were unavailable or disinterested, in some instances quite abusive. Every session I did, I made an incremental jump. What was very frustrating is in most instances, I was able to get maybe one session, and then that gifted healer would be gone. He would be off to the next town or something. And I would end up having to wait 6 months or a year and a half, whatever. And it sucked because I was suffering terribly and I needed a lot more intervention. But so when was it? I think it was 2006 or 7, I believe, somewhere in there. I was in Sri Lanka. I had formed an attachment to this woman, and I was getting all kinds of mixed signals. And I think she was actually a very sweet woman. I'm not faulting her, but I was getting a lot of mixed signals. And part of it, her own confusion. Plus, there was another man in the picture, and he happened to be living in the vicinity. So he had the advantage of being around all the time. And interference from her family. So the combination of all that. So it just wasn't working. And a friend of mine, sensing how I was suffering terribly, he told me about this Buddhist monk. And this is very unusual because the Buddhist monks usually do their Buddhist monk kind of things, which is a whole different kind of deal. But this monk had a gift where he worked as a healer. He would do individual sessions. And so when I found out where Yanasamana Thero was located, I would make these pilgrimages to his healing center where he saw his patients on a nightly basis. I was, every night that he was open for business, let's say, I drug my ass back up there. And, and sometimes he would do these group sessions for people, but I insisted on seeing him individually. And I would wait till everyone else had cleared out, and I would be the last person. And so night after night after night. So for the remaining weeks I was in Sri Lanka, I did 14 sessions. And then 4 months later, when I made it back to Sri Lanka, I did another 12 sessions. And I was so sick to death of that torment, of those patterns that were playing out. And it just enabled me to just kick through the walls, just blast my way through those walls. And it's that level of intensity and that commitment by stacking sessions as I did, that enabled me to break through. And it brought up intense amounts of emotion. But as I tell people, when the emotions come up, just face it, deal with it, get used to the intensity, and just blast your way through that way, because that's how you make the biggest breakthroughs. So get used to the intensity and keep putting one foot in front of the other, as I did. So night after night, I would show up for these sessions. And it was a breakthrough, because right around the time I started doing these sessions, I met another woman. And it took me a few months, because I was like strung out on the first one at first. But as I kept doing these sessions, the attachment I felt to the woman, the relationship that wasn't working, that was dissolving, and it was healing, transforming these deeply entrenched patterns. And then I got into a new relationship with this other woman, and that relationship, it lasted so long, it had its own set of challenges, but it was a very important part. It was the next step in my healing journey that needed to be taken. So, if you find an opportunity to work with a gifted healer, myself included, I'm trained by this traditional Native American doctor, and so I too facilitate the healing of these deep emotional wounds. As numerous people have said to me, so you too had to go through this kind of torment so you would understand the suffering of other people who are experiencing this kind of emotional wounding. So back in I'm jumping back and forth as far as the timeline here, so bear with me. In 2004, I was staying in a Hindu temple in Delhi, India. And at the time, I wasn't all that familiar with the Hindu Vedic tradition, but one of the priests who took a liking to me, he was encouraging me to attend one of the festivals. And I don't remember which one it was at the time, but when they were doing these ancient Vedic chants in Sanskrit, I could just feel it reverberating through my entire body. And then after a while, I learned about what they call yagyas or yagnas, depending on what part of India one happens to be from. And so it's this ancient Vedic ritual that has been performed for centuries, where the Hindu priests, they do these elaborate chants. And so as they do that, they're specifically doing these chants for an individual, or sometimes a group of individuals. But in my case, I had them commissioned for me. And my favorite one was for the goddess Durga. And that was intense, because that too, I felt it was helping to heal, to break down, dissolve, heal, transform these deeply entrenched dysfunctional patterns of attachment that had formed. And I would have these yagyas being performed for me, and they could be done from a distance. These pandits are Hindu priests who were chanting the yagyas, and they're being done from a distance, but it would be taking place in the middle of the night or through the night, which is ideal for me because I'd be laying down to go to sleep, and I would feel that power working on me. And even one of the housemates, when I would go stay up in Boston, he was feeling it too one night, to such an extent that he got up in the middle of the night, he went outside because he's feeling that intensity, and he felt the need to stand on the ground in his bare feet to ground out to help him manage that intensity. And then my other housemate in New York was being an asshole at the time. I won't go into the details, but there is one day when I was having the Mahachandi, which is my favorite of all the yagyas being done, and I had this intensity about me, and I confronted his ass, and all 6'2" of him was going backwards. It's like that fire coming out of me. He was just being blasted by it. And it was just like, whoa. He was afraid to cross me after that. So, but again, the main thing is the yagnas is I really liked them because, not only was it helping me to heal the emotional wounding, these distorted patterns of attachment, but also is helping me to evolve. Especially if you don't have the opportunity to work with the gifted healer, where you can do one-on-one sessions, yagnas can be like a profound asset. They are a bit pricey on one hand, but take into consideration, you have this Hindu priest Pandit who's chanting for you, I think 8 or more hours a day or something. And their focus is, and that power is directed on your behalf. So taking that into consideration, I think it's a really good deal. It's a great investment. Moving further down, I refer to my notes because I have so much that I cover here. And by the way, I'll include the links to the yagnas. And also, these articles I write, I can't think to include everything I write down in these videos. So read the articles as well. A vision quests. So when I trained with my mentor, Horace Dalkai, one of the last really extraordinarily powerful traditional doctor among the Kiowa people of Oklahoma, Horace would transmit portions of his own healing gifts. And then he would have me fast the 4 days and nights without food and water. And in order to earn the right to work with these gifts of healing. And since that time, I've gone on dozens of vision quests. And so as I'd go through the vision quest, initially he transmitted these portions of his own healing gifts. And then in my 20s, I missed a number of years. But by the time I turned 31, actually 30, I started feeling that pull to get back. And sometimes Horace would have me fast for shorter times, but when I went on my own, then I was doing that full 4 days and nights. And when I went back initially, I was thinking like, well, I go through the vision quest and I will develop the gifts of healing that enable me to facilitate the healing of a wide range of health-related issues, as Horace was doing, is working with people with cancer and leukemia and heart disease and stroke and just all kinds of things. And so I go through the vision quest, and yes, as I'd go, I would receive additional gifts of healing, and that power would get much stronger over time. But what I didn't realize is that it was also going to facilitate the healing of the trauma that I was carrying from my childhood and adolescence, and these really screwed up, distorted models of attachment that I'd internalized that was causing me to crash and burn in relationships. There are times on the vision quest I'd feel this extraordinarily powerful presence come into my body, and it was like a near-death experience at times. It'd be portions of my life would be flashing before my eyes, and I'd be reliving those past traumas, going back to childhood, or even events that had happened more recently. Sometimes traumas I'd completely forgotten about, no recollection of. But here I am reliving those events, all the emotions, the memories, all the sensory impressions, and they were intensely vivid. But as that's happening, it enabled me to just thoroughly was transforming all those traumas and all the highly charged emotions attached to them, and is creating this whole new foundation. As I went through this transformation, my relationships began to evolve. We're becoming much healthier. Vision Quest is the most powerful of anything I've done. Now, some people can work up to the vision quest, but the vast majority of people are not going to, because it's just too intense. Because you're fasting. You go through the full vision quest, you're fasting 4 days 4 nights, no food, no water. You're alone in the mountains, or out in some wilderness, in case you're some part of the country or world where they don't have mountains. But you're in the wilderness or mountains, again, no food, no water, fasting. You're not drinking rainwater. You're not foraging or finding anything to eat or drink. You are fasting without food and water. It is intense, but it's too intense for most people. Fortunately, those who work with me individually describe the same kinds of transformations taking place within their own bodies and minds as a result of the vision quest I've gone through. So you could experience working with me individually. This are even some of these other powerfully gifted traditional doctors, indigenous healers. You could experience the same kind of healing or transformation. So as I work with people individually, I act as a conduit by allowing this extraordinarily powerful presence to work through me. And I do work with a lot of physical conditions. Again, people with digestive and respiratory disorders. Some people feel this extraordinarily powerful presence working through me, this presence going down into the body. They feel this whole process of regeneration happening within the organs and tissues and all. But on an emotional level, say if you're going through a breakup or divorce, you're being strung along by someone who's jerking you around, patterns of abandonment, unrequited love. It's going deep within to take all these deeply traumatic experiences and all these highly charged emotions. It's taking it, it's transforming, transmuting it so that you can take it and you digest it and you assimilate it like the food you eat. As it's being transformed, it becomes fuel for growth. It's building this whole new foundation through which you can begin to attract into your life healthier companions and create more meaningful and more deeply fulfilling relationships. One thing that I encourage people to do and be aware of, look, you, like most people, you're carrying these deep emotional wounds, the trauma that in many instances goes back for decades. Again, decades of trauma and emotional wounding, all kinds of drama playing out in your relationship, all the hurt and confusion and anger and frustration and everything that you've gone through. And then you have even things like stress of work-related stress, and just all of the things that you've gone through over the course of your life. And maybe you've medicated yourself, self-medicated with alcohol, nicotine, if you're smoking, refined sugar, or just food, eating garbagey foods, and pharmaceuticals, antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, other psychotropic meds, and all these things. So people's bodies, and very likely yourself as well, become congealed with all that stress and trauma and all the toxicity of the medications and the recreational drugs. It's a big mess to clean up. Realistically, you're not going to clean that up in one healing session. And sometimes people can be really dopey. They think they're going to go to a healing. And like Jesus, like people approach me sometimes as if I'm Jesus. I'm just going to zzz, and they're going to heal all in one session. That's totally unrealistic. Please don't be that dopey ass. Healing's not going to work that way. No, it doesn't happen that way. Healing is a process. Think about it. There's a big mess to clean up. Seriously. Oftentimes when I work with people, it's session 1, 2, 3. It's like it's thawing the body out. Body's like so numbed, so congested, so congealed, so deadened. It has all this toxicity from the shit diet, the backlog of years and years of emotion and trauma and stress and all that. So the first, say, 1-3 sessions is like thawing the body out. Session 4 or 5, body's becoming more engaged, more responsive. I could just feel the body is like becomes a very participatory process. Your body is actually participating in the healing. Session 5 or 6, it's like the body becomes so engaged, and you go into these like profoundly deep states, at which, then it could really get in really deep, affecting healing transformation in the cells, the tissues, the internal organs, repairing injuries in the body, helping to facilitate the healing of a lot of these digestive symptoms. My one experiences with colitis and Crohn's disease and irritable bowel syndrome, but also, especially if you're going through, all the heartrending drama of a breakup or divorce, you stack the sessions up. And I encourage you, stack them up 3, 4, 5 days in a row. You're going to get this profound life-changing transformation. It's going to transform all that sadness and grief and anger, frustration, and torment that you're holding in your body. It's going to transform these emotions. You're going to digest it like the food you eat. You're going to let go of the waste product. And what you keep, that's going to be like fuel for growth. It's going to open your heart in a way that's going to increase your capacity to love and be loved. You'll experience greater compassion and empathy. And like so many people I've worked with who were enacting these toxic relational dramas and getting hurt and strung out, is I'd work with them. They'd work through all that. They become stronger, more resilient, much lighter, much freer, and they attract into their life a companion with whom they can truly love and be loved and create a much more meaningful, much deeper, more fulfilling relationship. And this too can be your reality. This can be your life, but take the steps. It can only be so when you take the steps to make it happen. So you have to take constructive action to bring this about. So I do offer, by the way, what I call the free heart mending or heart healing strategy session. So you could get on the phone with me and talk with me one-on-one. So you can follow the link. You could click on the link that I'll post with this video and schedule your free heart mending strategy session. And we'll go over what's going on with you. You can share with me the partner details, and I'll share with you what I feel will be the most advantageous resources that are going to facilitate your continued healing, growth, and evolution. And so again, also remember, you derive value out of this video, click the like, share this video with anyone else you know who's going through the heartrending drama, and covered a lot of ground here. And subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. And I'm going to leave you with that.